McCarthy.
Is to the Minister for Education and Training, Senator Birmingham. The Department of Education and Training has revealed that funding for students with disability loading in Tasmania will fall from $36 million in 2017 to $24 million in 2018. When asked in question time yesterday why his government was cutting funding for students with disabilities in Tasmania by 1/3 or $12 million in 2018, the Prime Minister said, and I quote, "I reject the assertion." Minister, who is correct, the Department of Education and Training or the Prime Minister?
The Minister for Education and Training, Senator Birmingham.
Mr President, the government is providing almost $1.6 billion this year for students with disability support across Australia, which is around $500 million more than was the case back in 2014. Strong growth that has been there under the coalition government in terms of support for students with disability, and strong growth that will continue into the future under our reforms that will see additional funding for students with disability across Australia and more students captured as a result of the use of the NCCD report. Now, I've of course just answered a question from Senator Lambie in relation to data particular to Tasmania, and I committed to the Senate to come back with that answer, and of course that's what we will do.
Order. Pause the clock. Senator McCarthy, a point of order.
Mr President, the question was who is correct, the Department of Education and Training or the Prime Minister?
Minister, had you concluded your answer, or did you have more to offer?
I can add, Mr President.
Well, in that case, Minister, I just will remind you of the question that was asked by Senator.
And I can add, Mr President, that in relation to Tasmania, estimated Commonwealth funding in Tasmania will continue to grow from $409 million to $427 million next year, $594 million by 2027.
Order, Minister. Senator Wong, point of order.
Point of order, direct relevance, Mr President. The question did not relate to aggregate funding, which is the figure that the minister is giving us. It was a very specific question about the Prime Minister's answer in question time yesterday, where he denied evidence which was given by the department. And the minister is being asked a simple question: who is correct, the department or the Prime Minister?
Thank you, Senator Wong. I will remind the minister of the question. Minister.
Mr President, I have not seen what the Prime Minister's question or answer was in question time yesterday. I am absolutely confident that the Prime Minister would absolutely have given accurate information reflective of the growing rate of funding that school students in Tasmania receive, and as I indicated to Senator Lambie, I will of course happily provide specific information to it.
Thank you, Minister. Senator McCarthy, a supplementary question. Order, Senator Cameron. You have a colleague on her feet. Order. Senator Collins. Senator McCarthy, you have the call.
Minister, why is the Turnbull Government cutting funding for students with a disability in the Northern Territory public schools by $10 million or 40% in 2018, at the same time that it's giving millionaires a $16,400 tax cut?
Minister.
Mr President, the Turnbull Government has committed very clearly that we will maintain and increase funding to schools, to public schools in the Northern Territory, and of course there is an overall increase in relation to schools in the Northern Territory that is quite substantial in funding support. We have recognised that there are unique circumstances in relation to the Northern Territory, and we will back the Territory Government in terms of continued funding support for those schools. Often, Mr President, though, we hear those opposite want to run a contrast with the Turnbull Government's policies in relation to tax reform as well and our enterprise tax plan. Well, Mr President, it's also very clear that we need to make sure that as well as today's school students receiving fair funding and an excellent education, that there are also jobs for them at the end. And we absolutely will not apologise for driving policies that help create jobs, help create investment across the Australian economy to ensure that as well as getting a great education, there are great opportunities for today's students when they are tomorrow's employees.
Thank you, Minister. Senator McCarthy, final supplementary question.
Minister, how is it fair that the Turnbull Government is cutting funding for students with disability in South Australia by $24 million or 20% in 2018, at the same time as it's handing $65 billion in tax cuts to big business?
Minister.
Mr President, Under our reforms, we will provide around $21.2 billion over the next decade to support students with disability, to provide them with the assistance they need right across Australia. Continued year-on-year growth in the support for students with disabilities. In fact, an average growth rate of support for students with disabilities across this package of 5.9% each year across Australia. That's a demonstration of the additional funding that's there and the reality that it captures more students than has ever been the case before because of the utilisation of the NCCD data. This is about delivering a fair model of funding that is applied consistently, and that in the case of South Australia, as indeed with the Northern Territory, as indeed with Tasmania, sees schools, including public school systems, receive more funding overall.